You know the sound. You're home alone, you walk across the living room, and then you hear it. That little creak. It's a sound that pretty much every house makes, right? But what if I told you it's not just random noise? It's actually a message. So today, let's decode what your floors are really trying to tell you.
And if you're in the GTA, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Whether it's an old house in the annex or even a newer build-out in Vaughan, there's always that one spot on the floor that just talks back. At first, you probably just shrug it off, old house charm. But that sound, it's not a quirk, it's a signal.
And that's the real question, isn't it? That squeak is your home giving you a heads up, an early warning about what's going on just beneath the surface, totally hidden from view. And we are going to figure out exactly what that message is.
Okay, so first things first, we've got to change how we think about this. Let's stop calling it a random noise and start treating it like what it really is, a direct message from your home about its own health. And trust me, it really pays to listen up.
Here's the bottom line right up front. That squeak was not an accident. It's a symptom, and it's pointing to something deeper. It could be about moisture, it could be a small structural shift, or maybe it's even about how the floor was installed in the first place. Your home is sending you a signal. All right, time to put on our detective hats. To understand the message, we first have to figure out the cause. So, let's dive into the why. Why do our floors make these noises in the first place? At its very core, a squeak is just basic physics. It's the sound of friction. It's what you hear when two things, like a floorboard and the subfloor, or a nail, are rubbing against each other under pressure. It's honestly that simple. No friction, no squeak.
And this is where it gets super interesting, especially for us here in the GTA. Our weather plays a huge part in this. Think about it. Your floor is kind of like a giant sponge. It soaks up all that heavy summer humidity and expands, and then it shrinks back down in the dry winter air. This constant cycle of expanding and contracting, well, that's the engine that drives the squeak.
So, it really all boils down to these three main culprits. First, you've got movement, which is that friction we just talked about. Then you've got moisture. That's the seasonal expansion and contraction. And then you've got mistakes. Maybe the contractor cut corners, used cheap materials, or just didn't secure the subfloor properly from day one. And this is maybe the most important thing to remember through all of this. That squeak you're hearing, it's just the alarm bell. The real problem is the movement, the moisture, or the mistake that's causing it. Trying to silence the symptom without fixing the cause? Well, that's kind of like hitting the snooze button on a fire alarm. So a little squeak here and there might be easy to ignore. But what happens when it starts to get worse? Well, that's when ignoring those warning signs can get you into some real trouble. And that's a fair question, right? The floor hasn't collapsed or anything, but ignoring a persistent squeak is a lot like ignoring the check engine light in your car. Sure, you can keep driving, but eventually it's going to lead to much bigger and way more expensive problems down the line. So what happens when you ignore that check engine light? The problems start to pile up. That noise can spread from just one spot to an entire room. You can end up with boards that start to buckle or warp. You'll see ugly gaps forming between the planks and even cracked finishes. And if moisture is the real villain here, you could be looking at serious damage to the subfloor itself.
And here's the one you absolutely cannot ignore. If you feel a board actually dip or feel loose under your foot, that's a major red flag. It means the connection between your floor and the structure underneath it is failing. This is often a critical sign of a much deeper issue, especially something like water damage.
Okay, enough with the problems. Let's start talking about solutions. How do the pros actually tackle this stuff to make sure the fix really lasts? This really gets to the heart of why professional help is so valuable. You and I might just hear an annoying squeak, but a trained professional, they see the subtle signs causing it. Things like tiny warping, slightly lifted edges, or they can even hear the hollow sound that means a gap has formed between the floor and the subfloor. They're basically reading the whole story your floor is trying to tell.
So a professional repair is really methodical. First, they map out the exact source of that friction. Then, they identify the root cause. Is it just movement? Is it moisture? Or is it a bad installation from years ago? Only then do they secure the movement, and this is the crucial part. They address the underlying issue, whether that's a hidden leak or a structural problem that needs fixing.
Of course, the best fix is always prevention, right? So for this last part, let's look at a few simple things you can actually do to help keep your floors quiet and stable for the long haul.
All right, so here's your action plan. Controlling the humidity in your home, that is huge. Using mats at your doors, never ever using a soaking wet mop on hardwood, and putting pads under heavy furniture, all these things reduce the stress on your floors. And, just a quick check for leaks every now and then can save you a world of trouble.
So, the next time you hear that creak under your foot, don't just write it off as house noise. Think of it as a message. It's an early warning system from your home, giving you a chance to act before a tiny noise turns into a really big problem. The only question left is, are you ready to listen?